Welcome back to Race to the Hill. Well, we're going to go right now to a very special CTV News exclusive interview with National Defence Minister Jason Kenney, who is joining us now from Kingston, Ontario. Minister, I'd like to get your take so far on how you think the campaign is growing. A lot of people saying that the Tories seem to be having quite a bit of trouble.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the first edition of your new show, Mercedes. Great to have you as a strong voice with your own show. I think the campaign, the real campaign, is in a way just beginning. We had a bit of a phony war in the month of August. I don't think a lot of Canadians were terribly plugged into it. I think most people will begin paying attention now, and I think they're going to see a clear contrast between a government that has one of the best economic records in the developed world, that has reduced federal taxes to their lowest level in several decades, that has one of the only developed countries with a balanced budget and one of the lowest debts in the developed world, a government that has gone from 5 to 45 free trade agreements, that has the wealthiest middle class in the world for the first time in our history, record low levels of poverty, the country that, according to Forbes, is the best country in the world in which to start a new business. According to a global poll, the most respected country in the world. This is Canada after 9.5 years of strong leadership, and I think people will realize that that's a preferable track record to continue with than Justin Trudeau's flip-flopping on deficits, wanting to raise payroll taxes, and Thomas Mulcair's ideas that would also kill jobs.
Minister, a lot of people have said that they believe, I realize you're the Minister of National Defence here, but this is as well a defence portfolio, according to Conservative Party leader Stephen Harper, that this whole Syria crisis and, of course, the picture, which we're going to show you in just a few moments here, I do want to warn our viewers because some people may find this disturbing, of little Alan Kurdi, who was found face down on a beach he'd washed ashore, triggered a lot of political debate about whether Canada is doing enough for Syrian refugees. Do you think that we're doing enough, Mr. Kenney?
Well, first of all, obviously, that individual tragedy was heartbreaking, and of course, it's symbolic of thousands of other deaths through human smuggling operations around the world, not just in the Mediterranean, but in Southeast Asia and elsewhere. I hope that one thing that comes out of this is a global determination to combat the vile criminals who run these human smuggling syndicates and jeopardize and lose thousands of human lives every year. In terms of the Syrian refugee crisis, it's not just a Syrian refugee crisis, Mercedes. It's a Middle Eastern refugee crisis, and it didn't just start last week or last year. It started really in 2006 when Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which is one of the parent organizations of the so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, began a campaign of terrorist violence, particularly against religious and ethnic minorities in Iraq, and hundreds of thousands of whom fled to Syria. And our government, ahead of virtually any other country in the world, began a huge refugee resettlement program. I'm the only Canadian minister who's been in Syria in over 4 decades, Mercedes. I went there to visit with the Iraqi refugees in Damascus back in 2009 when our government launched what was the largest refugee resettlement program that we've had since the Indo-Chinese boat people in circa 1979. We have, through that program, Mercedes, we have welcomed over, approximately 23,000 Iraqi refugees, overwhelmingly from Syria. For some reason...
Yeah, when you say from Syria, can you just clarify
Sure.
for us? People are thinking Iraqi refugees. What would they be doing in Syria?
They fled to Syria from violence inflicted by Al-Qaeda. The Al-Qaeda in Iraq terror organization, which attacked many of these communities in Iraq between 2006 and 2011, is one of the precursor organizations to what we now call ISIL. These refugees fled from Iraq primarily to Damascus in Syria between 2006 and 2011. Hundreds of thousands of them. We began resettling large numbers through an increase in our refugee resettlement programs. And for reasons I cannot understand, the media refuses broadly to report this. I keep reading that we've only welcomed 2,300 refugees from Syria. It's true we've welcomed 2,500 Syrian refugees who fled Syria, but we've also welcomed 23,000 Iraqis, primarily from Syria.
Minister, there does seem to be a change in the number of people who are fleeing. You have these waves of refugees and migrants moving into European countries. You have extreme tension in places like Hungary. Even if we accept Canada was an early intervener, isn't it time we change how we're reacting if the needs are changing?
Well, if you really want to understand the scope of this humanitarian disaster, look at the United Nations statistics, Mercedes, indicating that there are 15 million Iraqis and Syrians who are either refugees or internally displaced people. Part of what I'm trying to convey to you is that this is not just a Syrian question. The Syrian refugee crisis and the Iraqi refugee crisis are totally intertwined. In at least one instance, that of the Islamic State, they don't recognize a border between those two countries. They're creating victims on both sides, including the Kurdi family, whose story touched us all. They fled Kobani that was being attacked by ISIL. Now, as the Prime Minister said, the first thing we need to do is to stop the genocidal violence of that organization that's creating new refugees every single day, which is partly why Canada is part of the international military coalition. Yes, we have welcomed 25,000 Iraqi and Syrian refugees. We do welcome 1 out of every 10 resettled refugees worldwide, and we can and should do more, which is why we've committed. Well, no, it's not. And that's why the Prime Minister, before any of this was a story, committed in the very first week of the campaign to resettle an additional 10,000. So a total of 20,000 additional Iraqi and Syrian refugees on top of the 25,000 we've welcomed. I need to make one critical point, Mercedes, which is that we are focusing our resettlement efforts on the most vulnerable Syrian and Iraqi refugees. I've been to camps in Lebanon, in Turkey, in Jordan, and I can tell you that the populations of those camps are largely homogeneous from particular communities. That the small minority communities, the Yazidis, Mandeans, often the Kurds, the Assyrians, Chaldeans, Armenians, the Ismailis, the Druze, these small communities do not typically go to the UN refugee camps because they are minorities in those camps. They don't feel safe there. They go to urban ghettos in Beirut and Amman. Those are the kinds of people we're focusing on because often they don't even benefit from the UN protection or the hundreds of millions of dollars of humanitarian support that we are providing.
Minister, literally 30 seconds hard and we're off the air. I need to know, is there a way we cannot speed up getting people through? Why 55 months? You sped things up at your department. Can't you speed this up?
Well, I believe Minister Alexander is actually examining with his officials way that we can further accelerate what has already been the largest refugee resettlement program in Canadian history since that of the Indo-Chinese boat peoples. I believe he's looking at that, and I think there are some ways that it can be done. And if people want to support these refugees, please go to the existing sponsorship groups. They already have things in order. They're ready to roll.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have, but we thank you very much for your time tonight, Minister.
Thank you, Mercedes.